Hey everybody, welcome back to Scale Success Reptile Podcast. So it is the first Tuesday of the month. So we have a non hog nose breeder on, and we're going to be talking about geckos tonight. And a couple other stuff because Hannah has experience in other species as well for her actual career other than reptiles. So we're going to definitely pick her brain about that. But before we move on, let me give you guys a quick update on what's going on in our world. And so, what was it? I'm just getting over the flu, actually. And we just came back. Actually, my wife and I just came back from a um, Dominican Republic trip. We went to a wedding out there, so that was fun. Right after the flu, I I made it through and I was able to push through it and head out there and support our friends that got married. So that's going on in our world. Was it the week prior? We had what's it called? Aquashella. So Aquashella was a mainly excuse me, I'm gonna be coughing. I'm gonna try to mute myself, but Aquashella was a mainly aquatic expo. They have salt water, they have fresh waters, corals, um, plants. There was a whole bunch of different vendors within the aquatic world. So we decided to go out there and check it out. There was about another 4 or 5 reptile vendors, and we had a good time. It was really interesting to see that portion of the world, you know, the aquatic world, and the show for vendors was really, really great. We enjoyed it. Um, the organization, the production of the show was top notch. They had a appreciation dinner event after on Saturday night, casino night. It was really cool to be able to go see that and enjoy it. So we did that. If you guys are ever, I know they have one in Dallas. They have one here in South Florida. Last year was Orlando. This year was in Daytona, and I believe they have one more city. If I'm not wrong, it might be New York. I think they have like 3 major cities over the year. But it was good. We had that. Um, we just put down our a good amount of all of our adult breeders, yearlings, adult, and then some this year's hatchling that are already good sized into brumation. So that's already started. Pretty crazy to think about how fast the season goes. So let me real quick, let me do a shout out to everybody that's here, and then we're gonna go over some. Then shout out to some of our partnerships that we have. So let's see who's here. Heartland Reptiles, Jordan. Thank you for joining. What's going on, bud? Hopefully everything's going well in your world. Billy, B&M Hogs. Thanks for joining. Hognose only. Haha. Yeah, Hognose for life. That's right. Yeah, a couple other people here. Let me see. We're gonna shout out our partners real quick. So we have Ship Your Reptiles. It's our shipping partner. If you guys use them and or have not used our code Clovers 15, go ahead and use it on your next shipment and save $15. Also, this weekend or next week, if I might be wrong, but I think they're having a Black Friday sale on all their shipping. What's it called? On all their shipping supplies. So take advantage of it. If you need shipping supplies, take advantage and get some, especially those Phase 24 packs. They are on the pricier side. So if you can get them on the discount price, definitely shop for some. I probably will be shopping for some as well. And then we also have Husbandry Pro. If you want to take your husbandry, keeping and your record keeping to the next level, go try out our 30-day free trial with Husbandry Pro. I'm pretty sure if you go and try this out, you won't look back because it has helped me keep a lot good track on breeding programs, the breeding pairs, incubation, brumation, feedings, everything that has to do with keeping reptiles, you can do it in Husbandry Pro. So go ahead and do the free 30-day trial. All right, we got a couple more people in here. What's going on, Boba Fettuccine? Thanks for joining in. Salty Brood, what's up, Jose? Jose also has balls and hogs. I'm not wrong, or it might be other way around. Um, Recently got into hog nose this year, and he has ball pythons, and he just started his brumation as well. I think about last week or somewhere around the same time we did. So thank you for joining in with us, guys. Um, Mark, what's going on? TBM Reptiles, how things going, man? Thanks for joining in. All right. So, guys, we gave you a quick update on us. We're gonna now bring on our guest here in a few seconds, and we'll start picking her brain and talking about geckos and what it takes to be in the gecko world currently. And as I think she's been in it for a very long time. So, I'll see you guys in a few. What's going on, Hannah? Thanks for joining us tonight.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So, as I was introducing you to our viewers, you mainly concentrate on crested geckos, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So, give us a quick background on, you know, how long ago did you start this, and what got you started into crested geckos, or
Yeah.
into the reptile world if it was a different species.
Yeah, so actually, I think my first reptile was when I was a lot younger. I had a tokay gecko. But I would say maybe around 2014, I ended up getting into crested geckos because I saw like a display at the local Petco, and I was like, okay, I need to do some research because I didn't know anything. And I remember I was just like Googling, and I saw David Tiki's geckos, all his videos, and I was like, okay, this person knows something. I'm gonna watch all these videos and learn what I need to know. And then I actually got my first crested gecko from a reptile expo because I was like, okay, I need to be finding a responsible breeder for my first choice. And actually, my first gecko was just $35. It was a little female red bicolor. And I remember I was like, I want a red crested gecko. So I was like super excited. I didn't know anything about the value of crested geckos really. I just knew like, okay, I want a red one. It's really cool. And then I remember, I started getting on Instagram and following a bunch of other like pages about crested geckos. I started to think, okay, I have a red one. Maybe I want a different morph. And I remember I was like, okay, I really want like a black quad stripe. I don't really know why, but that's actually how I stumbled upon Eslin. And I found his page, Crazy Red Geckos, at the time, and he had a black quad stripe, and I was like, "Okay, how much?" And he told me it was like, I think 450 or something, and I was like, $35, 450. For me at the time, I didn't really understand, and I was like, "Okay, that's a lot, that's like a huge jump from where I started." And, we talked about it. He explained a lot of things about the market and, different morphs and how people breed for these different traits. And I think I don't remember the final price we decided on, but I bought the gecko, and um, I remember after that, I just was following his projects with Super Stripes, and he really got me addicted. So I kinda started out as just, "Oh, I want some pet geckos, I want some cool morphs," to, "Okay, I'm really obsessed with Super Stripes in, like, a very short period of time." And I remember I was just like, I don't really know him very well. I bought his
Yeah.
gecko, but I'm gonna keep pestering him because I know he knows a lot and I wanna learn from him. So, that's kind of how I got started. I think it was 2014, 2015. I was an undergrad in college and studying entomology at the time, so that's how it all started, and then I became just obsessed like everyone else, so
That's cool, and I have the similar story with Eslin, getting into hog nose and stuff like that. And same thing, I picked his brain for a while, and he just shared everything that he was that he knew for my
yeah.
to me, and I am where I am today. So that's pretty cool. How I think through all different species, has been a wealth of knowledge for a different amount of
He has.
people.
Yeah, I don't think I would be where I am today or into the projects that I got in if I had never stumbled across his page. So and just like, through the years, he got out of the crested geckos, but he's always been there. Like if I had a concern or a question, he's really been, like a friend and a mentor for me. So shout out to him for that because he's really great with people with that.
He is, yeah. And you know what? I mentioned to him, especially, I have daughters, so I want to have more females on the podcast. And I was talking to him when I was like, I need to get more females on podcasts, and he mentioned your name, and that's when I reached
Well, I
out.
really
'Cause
appreciate it. Yeah.
yeah, so he definitely does recommend you and looks up to you on your geckos and the person you are. Um, so you were talking at that point. You said you were in undergraduate school.
Mhm.
You do have a PhD. So what's
I
your
do.
PhD in?
Yeah, so I got a bachelor's in entomology. I'll make it the short version, but when I was in 8th grade, I met an entomologist through 4-H, and he got me onto an insect collecting project, and he was like, "You could do this for a living." I totally believed him, and I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna be an entomologist from that day," and I stuck to it. I went and got my bachelor's, in entomology. There aren't a lot of undergrad majors in entomology, but I went to a school that did have that degree, and then I, stayed there for my master's, also in entomology, and then finally I was like, "Okay, I've come this far. I really love research and academia, but in that environment, if you really wanna be your own, like, master in a way and do your own research instead of just working for someone else, you really have to take that next step and get a PhD." So I came out to Kansas, which is where I currently am, and I actually just got my PhD this spring. So it was a 10-year process, took me a really long time, but I did all my degrees back to back, so I think it was pretty much the shortest or fastest I could have achieved it in. But to be more specific, I study insects that basically attack our food after harvest. So if you think about cereal in your cabinet or your dog's food, dried food, flour, all those like dry goods, packaged goods, even chocolate candy bars, I study the insects that attack those foods after they've already been processed, packaged, and they're in storage. So I'm really working to prevent those pests, and specifically my specialty is invasive pests. So the ones that are going to attack all those goods after harvest, but they're not from here and they're really like devastating pests if they enter our system.
Okay. So that's a hot topic in our world too, in the reptile world, like invasive, especially here in South
Mhm.
Florida. With invasive like pests and bugs, how do they get introduced into our like ecosystem, into our worlds?
Yeah, so I can talk to you about the 2 that I work with. So the first one, we call it the larger grain borer. I wish I had a picture of it right now, but it's a really actually, wait a minute, I have a painting my friend made. It's kind of funny.
Okay.
Um, this is a really large version, but it's kind of cute. So it's this little beetle. It's really, really small. It's actually like, millimeters there, and it started out as a wood boring pest, so it has mouth parts that it can chew up wood, but at some point we don't really know when or why it started eating corn, and cassava, and we don't know for sure where exactly it's from, but we know it's native to a region from Mexico to maybe northern South America. And basically, when people noticed it, it was accidentally introduced into Tanzania in Africa. And everybody was like, oh my God, it's chewing through all the grain. Like, what do we do? And that was like 30 years ago, more than 30 years ago now. So people started studying it. And being that it's so close to our border here, there's been interceptions in Texas and other areas just because it's in such close proximity to the US. Um, and so for that insect, I mean, it can just fly over into
Mhm.
the US and, but the main way is actually for us humans to move the insects around. So likely it gets moved around from shipments, goes from port to port. The second insect that I work with is called the capra beetle, and so it's also really tiny as well. But that insect is more of a secondary pest. So that means like they don't have those really strong chewing mouth parts. They usually need food to be broken down a little bit or softer food. But that insect is incredibly devastating. They actually call it the 100 worst or most dangerous pests in the world, simply because it can really withstand a wide range of like environmental conditions. So, really cold, really hot. It can just kind of like go to sleep, as we call it, diapause, and survive those bad conditions and then wake back up and keep eating. So, it's often overlooked and can survive a really long time. But that insect is it can't fly, so people bring it. And actually, there was a recent interception in the Chicago O'Hare Airport. Somebody just had some food they weren't supposed to bring, and they brought it in, and then somebody found it in the airport. Like, let's imagine baggage claim. You know those dogs that come around.
Mhm.
They're like, "Oh, I smell some food," and they found the capra beetle when they intercepted the food and looked at the food. They found that beetle. So it can happen anytime, just like people traveling every day. You could imagine just like a little bug, like on your clothes, in your suitcase, with your food, and that's all it takes. So it's definitely a huge risk with insects.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's interesting because I thinking about this. When I first moved to Miami, I had just recently got out the Marine Corps, and I had taken the job of doing federal security at different federal buildings. And I worked at one of the buildings I worked at was the USDA at the airport,
Mhm.
and it was the APHIS building. So we
Yeah,
used to
yeah.
inspect all like the plants coming in from. We had like a lot of roses and flowers coming in from like South America, Central America, and stuff like that. And I remember they used to find things and they used straight to incinerator.
Yeah. Yeah, it happens every day, honestly.
Mhm. So it's interesting on that. And so um, so this is the entomologist thing. It's like a childhood dream then because you said eighth
Yeah.
grade, right?
Mhm.
It's pretty cool. My daughter now, my oldest is in seventh grade now, and since wow, it's probably like since she's been like 6, 7 years old, she's been wanting to become a vet, and so far she's been able to like we've put her on different paths to be able to reach that. She's like in a medical program in her middle school. We have the reptiles now, so she helps out with that. So I think one day I'm hoping that she'll say the same thing, like I wanted to do this since I was little,
And
and I
she
was
did
able to
it.
do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope so too. I'm sure she will.
Let's see. Let me remove this comment here. Um, so now you have that. How did that does that world or that science background ever help you out with the crested geckos? Do you ever take it a deep step, like a more scientific step towards that?
Yeah, I think just being that I do research, my mind is very inquisitive. So for me it's like I want to know things myself. Like I want to learn how things work with the animals. Like for me the biggest thing I noticed was just like the lack of research for the species crested geckos. Like a lot of people, they just regurgitate like the same thing that everybody tells everybody about how to keep them or why, the genetics are a certain way. But when I first started, what is that, 8 or 9 years ago now,
7 years ago,
I
yeah.
feel like the environment was a lot less, like, moving towards that advancing of, knowledge. I feel like now we have a lot of great, reptile people kind of banding together and putting out more, like, carefully curated information, even research, especially like Little Monsters and the initiative that they've been working on with Pangea and others to really like try to define some crested gecko genetics. And when I first started, that was not really evident at all. It was kind of like, especially like with the trait that I worked with, Superstripe, you know, when I was first producing those animals, people were like, "Well, just saying like the same old thing, like it's just luck, or you bred for this like through selective, like just pairing animals together that kind of looked alike until you got what you got." Like people didn't really like take it seriously. So I feel like at the time I was like, okay, how can we like do a genetic study? How can we like I even reached out at one point to some herpetologists at a college near me, and I was like, how can we do this genetic study? And then they kind of ghosted me in the end, and I never took it anywhere. But I was always thinking in those terms, and like if I had research funding, like I could just apply what I know in entomology. It's just basic like scientific method, and find someone to collaborate with and do this research. So I just always kind of like had that, I think, mentality when I was thinking about crested geckos as well.
Yeah, that's cool. So what are your thoughts? Have you been keeping up on like the genetic testing for the shed testing for morphs and stuff like that? Have you been keeping up with that?
What is it?
Have you been keeping up with like the shed testing for different genetic morphs and all that good stuff that's going on with the ball pythons
I don't think I
mainly?
have. No.
No. So there's one company, Rare Genetics, that's the main one doing it. But I think there's another like two other smaller companies that are also coming out with it, and basically, they're able to test for specific
Traits.
markers, yeah, out of the from a shed.
Hmm.
So that's pretty cool. A lot of people are
I think that would be awesome if we had that for crested geckos.
yeah, yeah. So they're working little by little on different species. They started with the ball pythons because it's the biggest
Hmm.
market out there. So they knew that they were going to get a lot more support, more funding. So they're trying to work with some colubri species, some bigger snakes as well, like the what's it called, reticulate pythons and stuff like that.
Hmm.
I'm not sure about. I know like people have asked about certain lizards. But I think they're still trying to figure it out on how to do for the lizards. So yeah.
That would be pretty
So,
amazing if they were able to pull that off for
mhm.
the species I work with. But I mean, I think in general that's really awesome. They're doing that with some other species.
Yeah, and then I think the biggest thing too for certain lizard species is sexing.
Mm, yeah.
At a young age through either a shed test or like a nail clipping or something like that.
That
Um,
would actually be really awesome because, I know with crested geckos you can sex them, but
mhm.
I personally have a lot of trouble with it. So usually I'm just like, it's an unsexed baby and I can show you pictures of pores, but I'm not confident. Like, because for me, a lot of times, like, I don't know if it's just the scope I'm using or the pattern on the geckos, but I never want to be like, this is for sure a female or this is for sure a male, and then be wrong. So,
Yeah, yeah. On the safe, stay on the safe side.
mhm,
Um, So I hear that. And with hognose, I don't know if you're familiar with the hognose, it's pretty easy with the tail, length and girth, but sometimes there's those iffy situations. And that's one thing too. I've been trying to practice more on popping, but they're so small that
mhm.
I'm still not 100% comfortable with it. But it just comes with practice, right? One of those things. But Rare Genetics does offer sex and through shed tests for colubrids, so that's
Okay.
pretty cool too.
It seems
Yes.
like at least with, like, the sex, that would be something easy maybe that they could determine for any
Hmm.
species.
Hmm. Yeah,
So
that was a lot easier. But for like actual morphs and genetic mutations stuff like that, um, they have it on the ball python side. They don't have it for any other species yet, just because their biggest thing is it takes a lot of time and money to be able to map the genome on each
yeah.
species. So I think that's why they went with ball pythons, but they're trying to do other species now. They're just trying to get the funding and um, collect as many sheds as possible to try to start mapping all the morphs and all that good stuff.
That would be pretty cool. Yeah,
Yeah,
what I
I
wanted to
think
do was map the genome for crested geckos, but
okay.
yeah, that takes, like, some group funding, some crowd
Yeah,
funding, and
yep. I think I spoke to one of the gentlemen from Red Genetics at Daytona, and their estimated cost to map the genome is $50,000
Mm, yeah,
per species. And how many species do we have in the in
a
our
lot.
reptile world? We have a lot. That's a lot of funding that well, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure there's universities and like
Mhm.
what's it called, herpetology programs out there that have maybe the capability, but maybe there's no need for it, right?
Yeah, I would say, because when I reached out to some herpetologists, I got the impression that, like, they were interested, but they didn't have the money. Like, they have very limited
Mm,
money. Like, I would say that field, like, compared to entomology, is underfunded. It's kind of like in the same group with, like, zoos and conservation. It's like, at least my impression was, it seems like, they really need, like, donations and, like, certain interests and types of funding that maybe relate to human health or something. Like, they need, like, these broad, like, linkages to get large amounts of money. And so they were like, we're working on this other one right now, and we don't have the money. And so, yeah, it was really my impression that, like, people are obviously interested, but they don't have the money.
yeah, yeah. It seems like, I mean, at least with your research, it directly affects our food source and stuff
Hmm.
like that. So there's definitely funding for that, right?
Yeah, and I'm through university, but I do my research at a USDA facility, and
Okay.
there's a lot more, like, funding at the
Mhm.
USDA, and there's a lot more, like, opportunity to do extra stuff. So it's like you have your main funding, but through that, you're also able to do all these other extra things. And so we do a lot of that molecular stuff all the time, and I think, I don't know tons about it, but I know that, like, if you have, like, large, like, groups of samples and stuff, it can be cheaper, and
Mhm.
depending on what company you use. Obviously, for insects, it might be different than what you'd who you'd send to for
Reptile and stuff
a
like that. Yeah.
reptile or a bigger, like, genome. So it can depend, but yeah, like, we have people in our unit that are sequencing some of the insects that we work on, like, putting their genomes together. So it's definitely more common.
Yeah, and like you said, I think once the science becomes a little more available and becomes a little less expensive to be able to run these tests, we'll definitely see a lot more. Or if somebody comes out with the funding and says, like, "Here, let's do it,"
Yeah, I
that'd
mean,
be great.
there's advances, like, every day in the molecular world. It's really, like, the cutting edge of a lot of the research, like, molecular anything, not just entomology, but molecular and a lot of other fields is, like, where it's at right now, and there's always, like, new tools being invented or discovered, and it just makes things more affordable over time.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, so that's going on, with the reptile world. I'm looking forward to it, and then there's always goods and bads to both sides, but I'm gonna keep an eye on it. I know if whenever there's hognose stuff available, I'm gonna use it. There's no
Mhm,
reason I wouldn't, especially on the poshead stuff. Trying to prove that out will help out. Um, and then I think, like you said, talking about like 9 years ago or even 3, 4 years ago, where it's a lot of guesswork we were doing with genetics and care of the animals. It's just by trial and fire sometimes, right?
mhm, yeah.
I think anything that will help us advance in that field is going to be better for the animals and for the community all in the whole grand scheme of things.
I agree.
So, now let's dive deep into the crested geckos. You mentioned that you specialize, and do you still? But you specialize in what's it called? Stripe, super
Super
stripe.
stripes,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, it's really what got me into it, with
Mhm.
Estlin, and when he got out of it, I bought a good amount of his super stripes for my project, and continued the project, and I still it's the thing that brings me joy. Like, I've seen a lot of new traits and like all those things. But for me, what keeps me coming back is still Super Stripes, even if other people don't like it as much. Now I think there's been like kind of this shift in the naming of it, or maybe a differentiation, but it's kind of hard to tell with what they call EB or empty back. So some people always called Super Stripe empty back, and some people always called it Super Stripe. But now they suggest that maybe they're two separate things, but maybe not. So there's like kind of some confusion. So right now you see a lot of people say EB instead of Super Stripe, but I still call it Super Stripe.
Okay.
I actually
Um,
have some geckos on the side here if we can kind of show them, but two of them are actually Super Stripes if anybody wants to see.
okay. And then super stripe, is it a recessive dominant trait?
So there's been a lot of debate. We were working together, kind of all the Super Stripe breeders, with Little Monsters, basically to compile all of our data. Since not any one of us could really say, okay, I have enough data to maybe make a claim. So we compiled all of our numbers from our pairings, and it looks pretty recessive, but I think there's kind of some debate whether it's incomplete dominant or recessive. So basically, in the case of incomplete dominant, it means that the super stripe is the super form. So it kind of still behaves like a recessive in that you need quote unquote hets, two animals that carry the trait to make the super form. So if you've been following crested geckos at all, if you know lily whites are incomplete dominant. But in the case of the lily white, the super form is lethal. So you breed two lily whites together and you get a super form, but they die. But we would be saying here in this case that the super stripe is the super form and it's not lethal. Um, I think that, at least for me, my numbers were always recessive. I was getting pretty recessive numbers on the dot. Um, Breed het times het, and you get some hets and normals, and you get a few visuals. And then when I bred visual to visual, I got all visuals. So for me, it felt pretty recessive. But the one thing that people keep coming back to is, they say true recessive traits don't have any like visual cues or hints in the hets.
Mm.
But with Super Stripe, you usually see what I would say are some hints or cues that it's a het, because usually you see like some partial pattern in the dorsal, or kind of hints of a stripe trying to break through in the dorsal. And so because of that, people were like, well, maybe it's not true recessive, maybe it could then be incomplete dominant, and those are just the individuals that would be synonymous with the lily white, and when you breed them together you get the super form.
See, and that's interesting. On the like genetic, like markers or something like that on recessive or dominant and complete dominant stuff. And I've seen this in hognose, and I'm not
Yeah.
100% sure, but what I've noticed is like certain belly colors on het sable, hognose.
Hmm.
And het sable is a recessive.
Yeah.
Um, but to me, it's like, okay, these hets have, I have multiple het sables, males and females,
And they
have the
have that.
same have the same color bellies, are very like cream color instead of a brown, darker color. From
Hmm.
different breeders, still have these markers, and then our actual hets.
Yeah.
But like there's no confirmation on it. So
Sure.
that's interesting too, on different point of views on if a recessive or dominant shows markers or not.
Yeah. And there's also a lot of variability with super stripes with the trait. Not really sure if that applies to like, helping us determine better if it could be incomplete or recessive, but it's kind of like with any trait, or at least with like lily whites, for example, you have different amounts of coverage in that trait. With super stripe, it's like you have different quality in the stripe, like the striping.
Mhm.
Um, Sometimes also like from super stripe pairs, we get what I would refer to as an EB or an empty back, which is an animal that truly has no pattern in the dorsal and is just like lined pins. You'll get one of those randomly out of a super stripe and super stripe pairing. So, there's some variability that comes with the quality of the stripe based on the pairing. So sometimes it's like you have two visual animals, you breed them together and you're expecting, a certain look, but you end up getting like 5 different versions, it's still super stripe, but there's a lot of variability.
Okay. And so I had looked at earlier on your morph market, and you have something listed a narrow road super striped.
Mhm. Yeah.
And is that to the small stripe on the back? Okay.
Yeah, so last year I had this idea that I wanted to take my most narrow visual super stripes and cross them and see if I got anything interesting. And the male, I call him Damascus Road. So when I made like those babies, they have a pretty narrow stripe and actually some of the patterns like bleeding together because it's so narrow. I just was like, okay, I'm gonna call them narrow road super stripes. It's still super stripes, it's just my own little, like, project that I have. I actually have Damascus Road here, if I can show you.
Yeah. Let me put you on solo so you can.
See if he's pretty chill here. I don't know if you can see him well.
Yeah. He's
This
a
is
big guy
Damascus
too.
Road. Yeah, this is a super stripe that I bred a couple years ago. Started with stuff from Eslin's line, and he's a pretty amazing guy. You can see his thick quad stripes and that really narrow line all the way down.
Really cool. And is he any other visual, or is just a super stripe?
Just super stripe that I know of.
Okay.
So,
Really cool.
but yeah, so that was one of my little projects that I had to kind of play around and see, if they make all narrow stripes or if that's just like just the variability and
Mm.
that's just what he came out as.
And it's so interesting how back to like, I think the reptile world is still such a young, community and industry where we have to be the ones to try all these little weird pairings out and try to
Mhm.
figure it out. Because you never know, how many
Yeah,
times has, somebody bought a normal pair and then get something new, right? So I think
exactly.
that's pretty cool of yourself too, that you're not letting yourself be narrowed into one type of breeding, or if you see something that you're willing to breed it out, that you are taking those steps and you know trying doing what you like, right? Because at the end
Yeah,
of the
for
day,
sure.
it's a lot of times it's what you enjoy too as well. um you know I think that's one of the best things about being a breeder is you get to be the first one to pick out the best out of what you're breeding. So I think
Exactly.
that's really cool.
Yeah,
um
I mean, with super stripes, it's really hard because 'cause I've kept so many. Like, it's like
yeah.
I didn't need to keep that many, but, like, when you see them pop out perfect, you're just like, "Oh my god," like, I can't let it go, but
Mhm.
you eventually start having to let them go, so
Yeah, you can't keep all of them. You can't keep all of them. What other morph do you really enjoy working with?
yeah, I mean, so for me, the other morphs that I've gotten have all been so that I could, like, make them into super stripes.
Mm,
So, like, obviously, I got in the Axanthics, and I got a lily white because I wanna make lily white super stripes, which actually I've made some progress with that this year. I actually finally had one of my, het super stripe lily white actually breed to my super stripe male, and I got some lily white super stripes, so that was pretty exciting because I had the goal like a few years ago, but stuff always gets in the way and just things in your personal life, things I was going through, so I wasn't able to like kind of capitalize on some of the pairings I could have done a bit sooner. But yeah, for me, it's just like I wanna make improved color, and super stripes, red super stripes, yellow super stripes. Kinda started with the black super stripes, so those are already kind of, like, easy to get. And then just, like, working on non-lily, like, really drippy, creamy, super stripes, the xanthic super stripes. Like, I'm just all about super stripes if you can't tell, so
Yeah, I mean, and that's good. I think, you know, in our world, we need to have something that sets us apart or that we're concentrating on. And you found yours early on too. You
Mhm.
know, from I think almost from the beginning, right? With the
Yeah.
super stripe
Mhm.
stuff.
Yeah, like,
Um,
I had that interest in quad stripes, and then when I found out the super stripe existed, I was like, "Okay, this is even better." Like, I just really like the clean, like, boundary, like, line look,
mhm.
and I briefly got into gargoyles, and I was still into that, like, I wanted the striped guards, like, I don't know why, I really like that clean, like, line marked, morphs in crested geckos. I haven't always been really into, like, the more, like, creamy or drippy or harlequin, I was always just like, "Give me the pinstripes." So
Yeah, I can. I was going through your Instagram and stuff like that, and definitely can tell the super stripe is everywhere in all your projects. Yeah. And then, did you produce some Azantic super stripes yet?
I haven't yet,
Okay.
but I'm working on it. I do have, like, a xanthic lily white that kinda looks like a super stripe. I didn't
Mhm.
produce it, I purchased it, and I was like, "Okay, this would at least be a good candidate to introduce into that project." So I'm planning on working on that. I do have, a het super stripe, hopefully het axanthic, but, when I started kind of crossing them, I was crossing with a het axanthic, not a visual, so I had no guarantee that this gecko is actually het axanthic, but, I do have some pairings that I did, with my axanthic and, some super stripe females, so I'm at least, like, starting the ball rolling, but if you're crossing 2 recessive traits, it kind of takes a little while,
Yeah,
to get the right things lining up.
100%. Yeah. So, how many? So you've been how long have you been breeding? You've been keeping so far for 9 years. How long have you been breeding?
So, I think, I started 2014, 2015. I don't think I started trying to pair anything until 2016 or 2017.
Okay.
I wanna say the first babies were either in that 2016 or 2017, year, and that's when I think that's when I made the first super stripes that we got, out of one of the females that I bought from Meslin and one of the males, and that was the really good pair that I had that to this day is just like it's actually the parents of this gecko that I just showed you.
Well,
They made all visuals, all amazing visuals, that really just, like, started my project out. So, I would say 2016 or 2017 is when I started breeding.
okay. I mean, so you definitely have some experience breeding and producing, geckos and stuff like that. How many around what are you producing nowadays on a
Yeah,
season?
I try to keep it really small. I would
Mhm,
say my biggest year was actually 2020. I think I made just over 100 babies, which, for some breeders, that's like nothing because some
mhm,
people make a lot. So that was my biggest year. And then after that, I think 2021, I actually like went through a health struggle. I got diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, and it was really, really difficult. And I almost actually quit keeping crested geckos at that point because I was having a really hard time. But I managed to rally. Like I was like, Eslin and other people were like, just sleep on it, like, don't give up, like, think about why you started. If you just sell everything, you can't get them back, so I was just like, "Okay, I just gotta take it easy." I think in 2022, I barely produced anything because I was traveling, for 2 months in Greece to finish up my degree, and I knew I was gonna be gone. I was really worried and, still struggling with everything, so I was like, "I'm not gonna really breed much this year because probably not responsible." And so I would say this year's, like, really the first year that I've been actually kind of back since 2023. I still kept it small. Like, I don't need to produce a ton, especially in this market. For me, it's just like picking my favorite pairing that I want to do that year or something I think people are interested in and just trying to keep it, no more than 10 pairs because that's still going to be a lot of babies.
Yeah.
Um, I need to count how many this year, but I want to say maybe I've produced like 30 or 40. I'd say no more than
Okay.
50. So, I'm just kind of keeping it manageable, at least for me. I work full time. I'm traveling all the time for my job. So, for me it's like I don't want to have anything that like a sitter can't handle.
Okay. So I was gonna ask you
It's
that
just me. Yeah.
with your travel and stuff like that. How do you manage your geckos and stuff like that?
Yeah, I definitely get nervous every time I have to travel because, I gotta make sure there's somebody who can help, but I usually, like, have friends at the university or somebody I know that I pay to watch my animals, and I was really lucky that everything pretty much turned out well when I was gone for 2 months. I was, like, so scared. That was the longest I ever left my geckos, and um, uh, everybody came out alive. So I think my very first gecko, she actually died while I was gone. But other than that, everybody survived. I think maybe it was just her time, but
Yeah.
yeah. So it definitely makes me nervous. But if you find someone, you train them how to do it, and you're paying them, obviously,
That's cool.
they're not
You
you.
know,
So if a problem arises, it's a little bit scary. But
yeah, yeah. And you know what? You mentioned something that, you got sick, and I've mentioned this before in different podcasts and interviews. It's like thinking about how, you know, sometimes we get carried away, right, with how many animals we can keep, especially reptiles, because reptiles, for the most part, are pretty low maintenance, um, compared to like a dog or a cat.
Mhm.
Um, and like how many can you really maintain even if you are sick, if you have,
Yeah.
very little time. Um, I think that's one thing I always tell people. Just really think about it before you start adding a lot
Yeah.
more. You know, five is manageable, 10 is manageable.
Yeah.
But once you start having 100 babies and
Mhm.
plus your breeders, it
It's
gets
it's not even that it's hard, but it's time consuming,
time consuming.
and,
Correct.
like, for me, when I was going through that, it wasn't just physically, because it was hard physically,
Hmm.
but it was also mentally because I was incredibly depressed, like, because of what was going on,
Hmm.
and so it's just like, I barely had the motivation for myself to be taken care of, and then you have to think about feeding 100 or more mouths, it's a lot. And so that's when, I think you really reevaluate, like, am I actually still passionate about this? Is this, like, still manageable? Like, do I need to ask for help? I mean, there were some days where I had to pay someone because I was just like, "I'm in pain. I can't do this." Um, but yeah, so it's definitely true.
But looking back on it now, I'm pretty sure you're happy you stuck with it and that you had people in your corner, giving you words of advice and cheering you on to keep on going, right?
Yeah, I mean, I still really enjoy it. There's still tough days where I'm like, am I getting like too involved in my career for this? I definitely still have days where I'm like, should I scale down a little bit more? But I'm glad I didn't give up because, they're animals that I really enjoy and the projects that I really enjoy. And, even if I quit, there are some animals like I'm never letting them out of my hands. So
Yeah. Yeah.
so it's definitely true.
When did you decided to go just from like a hobby to a business?
It's really hard to say. When I started, it wasn't because like, "Oh, I can make money." It was like, "Wow, this is cool, like, I wanna produce them." 'Cause, like, at the time that we started, like, not many people were making super stripes. I think it was Eslin, Reptiles, who found the trait, but it was just really, like, on the low, and most people didn't really like it. And for me, there weren't that many and there weren't good quality ones. And I was just like, wow, like there's territory to be. to be taken here. And so for me, it wasn't like, oh, I'm gonna make money. Because even then I think they were selling kind of low. They were selling lower than I ended up, kind of raising it up to when I was selling them. But it was kind of just like, I'm gonna make this and I'm gonna like prove that like it's a trait and that it's real. And so I think that's why I was excited about it and was working on it. And so I think that's why I really started. And then kind of as I went along, I was like, okay, people are gonna pay for this. Like it's paying for the hobby. Like I didn't make a profit. I like invested so much that I wasn't even making money, I would say, at least the first 4 to 5 years. Like, it wasn't until I would say, maybe 2019, 2020 that, like maybe 2019, I broke even on everything that I invested, and 2020 amazing year. I sold the most I ever did. Like, that was the year I first made a profit, and then 2021 was great too. And then, 2022 still good, and then obviously 2023 slowed down, but, it wasn't like a thing where I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna get rich now." It was just like, "This is really cool, I'm gonna do it, and it funds my hobby." Like, the money I make goes back into buying food for the year for the geckos, goes into buying better cages. Like, it was just like I was just recycling the money kind of and buying new animals. And then I got to the place where I was kinda like, "I have what I need, I'm good, now I have a little profit." And for me, like, on student salary, that money really made a huge difference because kind of that side hustle, I was able to pay off my student loans, which I never imagined would happen. So I paid off my undergrad debt, I graduated my PhD debt-free, like, that's what I put that extra money into. I didn't, like, go crazy with that or do something like, other. It was kind of like first and foremost supplies for the geckos. I bought an upgraded like rack PVC rack system from Gecko Junkie for my animals. I was like, okay, the animals are getting an upgrade first, and then I paid off all my debt. So I would say it's still not really like this is gonna feed me.
Mhm.
But it definitely helps on the side, when I've, struggled through things and all the medical bills that I had, it definitely got me through. So,
No, and great accomplishment on, getting a PhD on no debt because it gets really expensive, real fast. So that's definitely good that this helped you achieve those goals and while doing something that you enjoy, really.
yeah, yeah, I never imagined it would have gotten to where it has today, because, like I said, when I started, it was just I was excited about breeding something and trying to produce this dream, this goal gecko. And then the fact that it went to where it was, like nobody saw that coming, especially with days antics and everything and the price that they were at. And my family, when I first started, they thought I was crazy. Like, well, because when I started, they were like, "Okay, this is a pet," and then when I started getting more, they were like, "Okay, why do you need that many pets?" And I was like, "Well, see, like I can make some money off of this. It's not just like I'm hoarding or something. Like
Mhm.
I'm selecting animals for their traits." And they finally understood, and later they were like, "Wow, like we never imagined you'd accomplish that with that." And so they finally understood, and they were pretty impressed, but when I first started, people thought I was just, like, kind of crazy.
Sure, for sure. I know what you mean. I think we all go through it, especially once we start telling like our family, close friends are like, "You're gonna do what? How much money you spending on a reptile? On a
Yeah.
lizard or something like that?" It's pretty crazy. Evan just jumped on saying hi.
Hey there.
And Bud was a so that's really interesting. On how that sometimes just takes a leap just within the day to day stuff that you're doing and just working on the projects you like, right?
Yeah.
Uh, because I'm pretty sure if you wouldn't, created a business out of it, you probably wouldn't be able to like probably got into the Xantics and all the other stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, I don't think I would've, and with the Xanthics, I think I got a little lucky there too, because when I first started, I just got a het and a het, and I was like, "Okay, I'm starting small." They weren't as expensive at that point. I think I got the male and the female together for, like, no more than 2,000, like, total, and, I started making some of the visual xanthics and, not as many as other people, but I made a few, and then when, like, the big boom happened and they were, like, really expensive, I was able to sell a few during that time. And now it's definitely come down and, we're seeing that all over the market, in general. But, I feel like I was kinda lucky. Like, obviously, I did the work and I invested at the right moment, but, not everybody's able to do that, and I had a little extra cash because I sold some super stripes and was like, "Okay, I can at least invest in 2 hets," and it all started
Yeah,
there.
that's cool. And now, you talk about pricing, especially with the market is going on this year, and I don't think it's the reptile industry that slowed down. I think it's just in general, our
Yeah,
our economy is slowing down a little bit. People are
yeah.
holding on to their money and not going out and spending on.
We're all
I'll
like
say,
we're spending so much at the grocery store and at the
yeah,
gas pump
yeah,
and our taxes and utilities, and we don't have any extra money. Like, like during COVID time, it was actually booming. Like people were scared the market was gonna crash then. It was
mhm,
booming then, and like we're getting those like checks from the government. So
mhm,
like people had all this extra money and the taxes were lower, and then it slowly just jumped up, and I think, you're right. What we're seeing, I think, is also a reflection of the actual market in general right now. Like, it's kinda scary out there.
yeah, yeah. People aren't going. At least most people aren't going out and spending their money on luxury items. And
Mhm.
sometimes some reptiles that we produce are luxury items
Yeah.
on some of the price tags they have, right? So,
Mhm.
what is your strategy right now with like pricing and keeping stuff, whatever you produce moving and not having just sitting on stuff currently?
Yeah, I mean, I have had to be, more patient. I think for me, it's always been there's a lull in the middle of the year anyway, and most of
Mhm,
my sales always come in spring and fall. And so, like, everybody's like panicking in the beginning of summer and everything, like, oh my God, nothing's selling. And, I was definitely feeling that too, but I remind myself like, hey, this is kind of actually how every year goes, at least for me. It's like, the summer is kind of a slow time. Um, but I really just started to focus more on, first of all, for me, I don't like I'm not gonna like jump and like price all my animals as like they're worthless, Like I'd rather keep them and grow them out, and take my time than just be like, okay, they're $50 each. Like, I'm not gonna do that. Like, I think for the health of the market, you have to hold your ground, in some ways, even if it means you don't get a sale.
mhm,
But for me, the biggest thing was just, I started posting more, like engaging more with my followers. I started offering like long payment plans, not just like for winter, but like, hey, like obviously my prices aren't as high as they were, but it's like, hey, here's a reasonable price. If you're interested in an animal, you don't have the money, I'll give you 3 to 6 months. You can pay it off, and I end up getting what I need from it to feel like, satisfied with the sale. And they also get what they want. They just get more time. Obviously, I'm not charging them like interest or something. It's like same price, just you
mhm.
get extra time to pay. So I started really focusing on just like giving people more time, being flexible, in that way. Obviously it means I have to hold the animals longer, and that's not as convenient, but for me, I was willing to do that. And then yeah, just kind of being consistent with my pricing, being willing to have sales. Like I always talk with other breeders too. Like I always talk to Kevin, at Kevin Stoltz. I'm always just like, hey, what are you pricing these at right now? Like I always consult other people, because I don't want to just be like way out there and just totally unreasonable if things really have come down that far.
Mhm.
So for me, it's just like talk to your friends, ask them what they would charge. I always entertain offers from people no matter what. So I always tell them like, "Hey, just be brave enough to ask me. I might take it," you know? And That's just kind of my strategy. Try to be flexible, but also at the same time, don't just completely like just throw things down and just say, "Hey, I'm selling this for dirt." So,
Yeah, all good pointers and advice on that. I agree on all that. And two, our reptiles are they're gonna be worth more in 6 months to come.
yeah.
They don't devalue, they're actually appreciating value,
Yeah,
because we're
like, I
taking
feel
the
like
time to grow them out.
some people with Xanthics, they're talking like they're gonna be worth $200 soon, and I'm like, "Who are you guys?" Like, maybe you wanna buy it at $200, but once you get it and you wanna sell it, like, you
You want to toss
destroyed it.
dollars for it, yeah,
So I'm
yeah,
just like, some people gotta have some, self-respect, and, like, there's gotta be a point where you're like, "Okay, no matter what, this animal's still worth this much." Like, there's still like, my super stripes, like, maybe, I'm selling them a little less than, I sold maybe in 2020, 2021, but for the really, really perfect ones, it's still really high, like, because I know they're worth that, and if somebody wants it, they're gonna pay it. For maybe the lower quality ones, sure, I'll sell them at kind of where I started, but back when I started, what, 2017, 2018, I was, like, asking for, like, 500 or 1,000 for, like, the really perfect ones, and that was low, and I was like, "Oh my god, 1,000, like, this is so much." And then, like,
mhm,
the market kind of grew, and I was like, "Okay, this is the quality I have," and, the prices went up, and so it's like, there's a certain value I'm not gonna go below even for an Axanthic because it's a recessive trait, it's a really amazing trait, and there's still a lot of people who want it.
yeah,
So I don't
yeah. I
know,
think
I'm just kind
they're
of like,
they're
don't throw yourself down before you have to, like, some people are just like, "Okay, I'm gonna sell it for, like, $400," but it's not gonna help anybody.
I agree. I agree. Yeah, and as antics in any species, it's such a cool, morph, and it catches even just the keeper. Some people will pay an extra, premium for an Azantic because it's such a cool looking animal.
Yeah, and I think,
Yeah.
it's like anything else now, it's like, now the rush is kind of over, tons of people still want it because they couldn't afford to get in on it, but there's gonna be, like, some differentiation when it comes to quality, like, you know, when you start seeing, some more of the white that people want, and need to start seeing that structure, like, for a lot of people, the structure's already there, but some it's still like, just throwing this together and get what we get. But I think, now it's like it's heading more in that direction of like, okay, I have this really great pair now and I'm making really, really cool Axanthics. Like I've already seen so many differences just in the pairs that I have. Um, like, some of the Axanthics fire up really, really dark black, and then its sibling stays kind of like gray and light. So a lot of people want the really, really dark ones versus the light ones. But there's also, like, this really, like, interesting, like, highlighter yellow that you can find on the white pins on some of them. It's kind of like that highlighter yellow that you'll see in some of the lily whites, and it's, like, really, like, striking, but I've noticed, like, some of my animals have that, and some don't, but it's like, there's already, like, these interesting things that are coming out of Axanthics, I think, that maybe not everybody's paying attention to, and could definitely, like, be built upon or turn into something more interesting with the trait, so, yeah, I think there's a lot of
You mentioned something that I didn't think about was them being fired up. I because I think about snakes and Azantic, things, but now you talk about it, like, wow, they can actually get darker when they fire up or,
they
different
do.
colors. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so I've just noticed, like, some just right out of the egg, like, they all start out dark when they're first born, but some, they just, like, get that really, like, dark, like, just the light you can't the light's just, like, not reflecting, and you can't see them very clearly, they're so, like, dark, and then the other ones, it's just they're always, like, gray. They fire up, but it's not very dark, so I don't know why there's that difference, but obviously people want the really, really, really dark ones.
So we have one of our viewers asking, if you had any Azantics you could show us.
I do, but I would have to run upstairs and grab it for you. If you have a moment, I could.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, take a quick, yeah, go, we'll do a quick, pick it up and I'll talk while, um, So yeah, as I was mentioning to her, um, it's interesting on the two worlds where like I didn't think about it being fired up. I think that's another cool trait about um, certain lizard species. Um, I actually want to get some crested geckos because I think they're pretty cool looking lizards, and they're smaller on the side on the smaller side. It's still manageable, and they have so many different cool genetics and morphs there. Um, and what was I say? The empty bats or the what's it called? Or and the was it? I love the super stripes. I think is another cool morph that she's working on. Let's see, that's an extra step when you breed New Caledonian geckos. I haven't fired them up for photos. Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Cool.
so this guy is a
You're welcome.
rebus. He's pretty massive. He's not totally fired up right now, but he's actually one of my ones that gets the really really dark, and actually he produces the really really dark babies. But I produced him from a pair. It's from the altitude line, and he's one of my really nice axanthic breeder males.
I
There's
really
not
like how the crown has the little fleckings of white and stuff. The little crest. That's really cool.
Yeah, so his dad is like huge, and I don't know if you can tell, but he's pretty huge too.
Yeah, definitely a bigger size gecko.
And with
That's really
age,
cool.
he actually got some of those like yellow pins in the white. I don't know if it really relays on the camera, but you might be able to
No, it
see.
looks white. You can't really tell the yellowish um
It's like
patterns.
right here.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, you can see little off-white colors.
And if you
Yeah.
look closely, like in person, you can see some of the scales have like this highlighter yellow marking on them, which is pretty cool. I don't really understand what it is in the xanthics yet, but people are noticing it. So there he is.
Yeah. And then we also had a question from Balls and Hogs is talking about that he loves his tail. Does the value really affect if they lose their tail? Do people? Um,
I would say no. I would say if you ask most breeders of crested geckos, they would say that they wouldn't sell a gecko for less just because it lost its tail. But they don't grow back. So yeah, I know there are some people who like, for example, if they just want a pet, maybe some people are like, "Oh, I don't want one without its tail." But there's also some people who literally message me and are like, "I only want one without a tail." So some people think it's cute and some people don't like
yeah.
it. But I don't think it affects the value. I mean, it makes the breeder sad because you're like, I remember what that tail looks like, and he doesn't
Hmm.
have it anymore. But
Yeah, and then certain, like that one especially, it has that high white on the tail.
yeah,
So it does give it a nice little contrast to the rest of his body. It's pretty cool. Do you have like a ratio or like a more of your geckos have their tail still, or is it a hit or miss?
yeah, I wouldn't say I only had one gecko that I had personally that I didn't already buy tailless that lost its tail a couple years ago. It was actually the first one. And then since then I've had some incidents and I've had more babies that lost their tail.
Mhm.
But for me, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter. Like it's like okay. At first, it was like no, like you're the first one.
Yeah.
My record is over, and then it was like okay, this just happens. I had a wasp get into my gecko room and was like landing on the cages, and when I went to like catch it and remove it, I had like a whole like row of like geckos that flipped out and dropped
Oh
their tail.
wow.
So I was like, okay. You were disturbed by a wasp and you dropped your tails, but okay.
Is it? I think and I've heard different things. Different people like you know. I shut the door too loud and
Yeah.
they dropped the tail and stuff like that. It's very interesting on how
My
what
my
affects
first
them.
one was like I was sleeping because at the time I kept I kept the few geckos I had in my room and I was sleeping and I woke up to like loud like banging around in the cage and it was just one gecko and she was like running around frantically and like she dropped her tail and there was no storm, there was nothing. I don't know what happened, but she just like flipped out in the night and lost her tail.
You know, especially the angle you're holding him right there, like you can tell from his face structure that he's a big gecko.
Yeah,
Like
he's
you
really
actually
big.
tell, yeah, he's really cool.
He's
Really
a big
cool.
boy. Well, let me put him back real quick.
Okay, cool. Guys, well, she is out. I just wanted to remind you guys, you know, to go check out Husbandry Pro. I got my Husbandry Pro mug here. They sent me. The link is in the description to a 30-day free trial. So go check them out. Also, go to Ship Your Reptiles and use Clover's 15 to get $15 off your next shipment. And again, they are running a sale on all their shipping materials. So go check them out as well. I think either probably for Black Friday, something like that. So all right, so we you know you had that Xantic stuff. You have your Super Stripe. Do you have any other species of reptiles?
Um, so I used to have a gargoyle gecko. I used to have
Mm.
a pair. I had a male and a female, and I produced some babies. And I was like, I don't know if gargs are for me. Like, I just wasn't excited about the project. So I ended up selling the male, but I kept the female. I sold the babies or gave them to friends. And actually, Eslin has my female now because he's kind of on the down low, getting back into geckos. And so he has her. He was really interested, and I think he found a really nice male for her. And so I'm like, I don't want her to just like, and because the other thing was like, if she would just lay duds every year, like six, like she would just lay duds faithfully, like beautiful, like eggs. And I'm like, she's just like such a great producer. And I'm just like not producing anything with her. So, I
Yeah,
was,
I think was it the weekend when we went to the Aquashella. I was at his place and I'm picking him up. I think he was feeding the geckos before we left. Is she a red?
yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
red
So I saw
stripes.
her. Yeah. So
And
it's
so I was like, okay, this makes me feel happy because like I'm sure she'll make something great with him.
yeah. Yeah. For sure. But yeah. You know, it's funny because when you were picking up when you went to go get the Xantic, I've been eyeing crested geckos for a few months now. Just haven't pulled the trigger on any. The Xantics really caught my eye, but then price tag right
Yeah.
now. You know, I still have a good amount of hognose to add to the collection. Um, but I'm definitely gonna get into some kind of crested gecko soon. Just got to figure out what I really want to do with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say now's the time with prices being
Mhm.
lower.
Mhm.
Some people are like still scared because like, oh, how low is it gonna go? Is it gonna be worthless? But I would say
It's almost like
that's in
playing
the
stock
future.
market, right?
Yeah.
Like, do I buy now? Do I sell now? Do I hold? You know, but yeah, I mean, I think anytime, you know, if you're going to be holding on to the right price point, eventually the animal you're looking at is going to be gone. First of all,
Mhm.
you know, it's happened to me, and I'm pretty sure it's happened to a lot of reptile
Yeah.
people. You look at one animal, and you're like, let me come back to it,
And then it's
and
gone. Yeah.
it's gone. And there's no, you know, you're like, oh, I should have pulled the trigger on it. You know, I should have
Yeah.
bought it. It's definitely happened to a lot of us. Um, but I think the reptile world is just growing day by day.
Mhm.
You know,
And there's always something new. There's already new stuff that people are like, "Oh, I found this," or "I found this," and then everybody goes crazy. So, like, there's always something new, and I don't think they're ever, like, worthless. Like, okay, if you're just, like, making just, I guess, what they call ugly, just, like, the lower end, just not much pattern or anything going on, okay, then
Mhm.
maybe it's like pet gecko. You're gonna be making pet gecko quality sales. But, like, if you have some of these cool geckos, like, money is money. Like, they're not
Yeah,
worthless. So even though people are, like, scared and the prices are lower, Like, when I first started, I was hustling, like, every day, and I wasn't making much at all, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm still like, I'm accomplishing something." So,
Yeah.
just depends on your perspective, and I think when that big boom happened and, the huge price of some of those geckos, people were like, "Okay, this is easy," and the price tag's so high that when, like, the numbers come back down, people are just like, "Oh, it's nothing." But, like, that's how it was before, actually.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
it
I
just
think
means
people just got used to riding the high wave, and then,
yeah,
now that
and
it's dropping, everybody's scared. Not everybody, there's a good amount of people that are scared, dropping pricing and all that other
yeah,
good
and,
crazy things.
a lot of the people who just started and, they were, like, banking on those big bucks, like, it ended, and I remember actually at the beginning of this year, before it went down, um, I bought an animal for a lot of money, but it was lower than the current market, and I was like, "Okay, I got a good deal," and then the prices crashed, and I could have, bought 2 or 3 of what I bought for what I spent, but it's like, you gotta take what happens as a lesson, and it's not that it's worthless, like, I'm gonna breed the animal, I'm gonna make some babies, and even if I sell those babies at less than what I paid for the adult, I'll still make back the money. I just might
Correct.
have to sell
Yep.
2 or 3 or 4 to make the money back, but I'll make it back eventually. So, I think people just have to be more patient and think about it in those terms, it's like the Xanthic babies were going for like 9, 10,000 a year ago, and, it's just like, "Okay, 1, 2, 3," you made all that money. Now it's like, "Okay, maybe I have to sell 5 or 4 to make the same amount." People still want them. So is it
Yep.
really that bad? No. Like, I'm still selling the animals, it's still a decent amount, just you have to sell more for the same amount, like, people just have to adjust, and I think maybe look at it through a little bit more of, like, that kind of positive lens
Mhm.
or just math, like, "Hey, just a few more and it's the same," like, it's
Yeah.
not that big of a deal, um,
And I think it's just, putting a little more legwork into it.
yeah,
Like you mentioned, engaging your followers more on social media, uh, you know, offering the longer payer payment plans and stuff like that. And people that are doing that are gonna, keep selling animals and are gonna survive, the low times, and gonna be there when the market's up high again, because it goes through waves.
yep,
Yeah. We've seen it even with morphs in the ball pythons, where there's a morph that nobody liked 8 years ago, and now it's the rave, right? Because
yeah,
somebody added the right ingredient to it.
mhm,
You never know what it could be for any of these species either, right?
I
And if you
agree,
have those ingredients, then great, you hit the jackpot,
I definitely agree,
on that. So I think people need to think about it as a marathon and not a short, and keep on working with what they like, really. And
mhm,
if I think one of the biggest things, like you were talking about earlier, thinking about if how much you want to produce a year, or how many animals you want to add to your collection in total. Um, you
mhm.
know, if you're going into the new breeding season and you have more than 90% of what you produced the last year, breed
Probably
this
shouldn't buy
season.
anything, yeah,
Yeah, or yeah, don't buy anything, or do 50% of your breeding instead of all of them, right? Like
mhm,
all that stuff, instead of going right back into it. It's like, all right, I'm gonna produce more animals, and then what's gonna happen? Drop the pricing again, or whatever it is, to try to move those animals.
yeah,
Um, this is my first year breeding, and so far I've been doing pretty well for what I expected my first
mhm,
year. I've been moving animals on the weekly basis. I'm not sold nowhere near sold out, but I didn't expect to be sold out my first two
yeah,
3 months after breeding. Um, and then, like,
yeah,
I
and
have that mindset. If it comes, around next breeding season, I still have more than 50% of what I produced, and I'll probably only breed 50% of the animals that
yeah.
are ready to breed.
I mean, like, obviously, I don't know if your breeding season is different, but for me, at least in the state I live in, like, even though I regulate the temperatures in my room,
Mhm,
the geckos can definitely tell when it's winter outside, like, even
mhm,
if I have the temperatures up and they don't lay. So for me, my season's, like, maybe May to October, And like this year, I think it was already done almost like at the beginning of October, like end of September, because we had a cold snap. So, like for me, it's like the animals I produce now, if I obviously I didn't sell them all before the end of the year, so they're gonna like last me. Like, I'm gonna be selling them throughout the spring and until I start producing more geckos. Like, even if I get the first eggs in May, that's 3 months until the first babies, and then you can't sell them right away because they need to be at least like 3 grams. So it's just like it's gonna take a while for me to actually like have those new babies, and so you're kind of just like selling what you had from last year anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, and those animals that you have from last year are just going up in value, you know?
Mhm.
At what age can the crested gecko breed?
So usually they just like go based on weight, but a lot of people want to see at least a number. Like for females, they want to see like 2 to 3 years old. But definitely some people who get their animals up to weight really fast, maybe they could breed them sooner. But I find that like your females kind of tell you when they're ready anyway. Like if you're not like forcing them into anything, like they'll lay the eggs when they're ready. So like even if a female's up to weight, they may not lay their first year, even if you bred them. So, like usually the females, it's 2 to 3 years, but you want to see 45 grams. And for the males, they grow a lot faster, and they can breed a little lighter. So it could be like 38 grams, 40 grams for the males. But the males is like year and a half to two. But for me, it usually always takes on kind of the longer end of things just because of my climate and how things are here. So mine are usually a bit slower growing than maybe some people like, if you're in a more humid, hot climate all year round.
Okay, so you'll say about
But
males
you're gonna
about
get
a
at least
year,
2 years, 2 years, I would
at
say.
least 2 years. Okay,
Yeah.
okay, and about the females about 2 to 3 years. Say about the
Mhm.
same time, almost time frame. Okay.
Yeah, sometimes, like, even if your female is, like, physically ready,
Mhm,
you breed them, and maybe they don't lay anything.
mhm.
So, then next year I try again, and usually they're ready. So, usually by that point, they're always most definitely 3 or sometimes even 4 years old.
Okay. And do you provide depending on on what temperature you keep at your home, stuff like that, but what is the range of temperatures that you keep them on, and do you provide like supplemental heat for them?
Yeah, so where I currently live, upstairs is kind of a unique situation, so there's, like, no, insulation upstairs in the home that I rent, and, so basically during the summer, it's, like, the outside humidity and outside temperature, so I actually have to cool the whole room, with an AC unit, and I keep it at, like, 80 degrees. And then, during the winter, I have to heat the room because again, it gets pretty chilly. Like, it would be, like, 68 or something, like, whatever I keep my house in the winter. And so I heat the room, I would say, during the winter to about 76 degrees, 77 degrees, and then it's set to drop lower at night. So during the winter, obviously, it drops a bit cooler at night, and then during the summer, it's just kind of the natural drop in temperature, because otherwise it's 80 degrees during the day. So yeah, I control the temperature in the whole room.
Cool. Okay. So, I mean, with them with crested geckos, they don't need really high heat. So if your home is about what, if you're doing about high, let's say 76, 77 in your home, do you still would you still recommend heat on them, or they're okay within that temperature range?
I mean, I would say that they could make it because, the previous places I lived, I didn't have the ability to control the temperature of the whole
Mhm.
room at that time, and so I would say my collection was kept on the cooler end, but I started to have some problems. So, like, yeah, they can be okay, but I had, like, a female that when it was just, like, cooler, even though it was technically fine, she started to, like, produce infertile eggs, but she retained them. I saw a trend with her. She was, like, retaining them, and had multiple eggs, and I was able to get them out. I think it's just, like, maybe this specific female, an issue she has, but I noticed those lower temperatures, like, made the problem more of an issue, and
Okay.
so when temperatures were a bit warmer, sooner when they needed to be, like when she was wanting to lay eggs, because it's her own like decision. Like she would start to lay like really early in the year when it's still chilly. Um, so I found, being able to have the heat more a bit higher during that time when she would choose to lay eggs anyway, kind of eliminated that problem. So I would say definitely for breeding, like your geckos aren't going to be as interested in breeding if it's only like 75 in your house. And even though it says it's 75, like if there's a chilly draft like from AC or whatever, like it's going to be a bit actually colder in their cages than you think. Um, so I found just like having that supplemental heat really made a difference in the productivity of my group. So.
Okay. And with supplemental heat, do you do it through like a heat tape or like overhead heat?
So I do it actually through just like a space heater.
Okay.
But I use a Herpstat. So I use this Herp, specially made like to attach to like a heating unit or a cooling
Mhm.
unit. And I've never had a problem. Like if ever something went wrong, it would cut off. So I've never had an issue with like the heating unit that I've used. And I've been using the same one for over 5 years. Every year I just actually get a new heater. So I get a brand new one. They're not that expensive. It's actually really small because my room's small. And then the Herpstat has just been going strong since I would say 2018. Um, Really recommend that product. You just have to like, if there's ever a power outage, you just have to check the time schedule. Because it like if the time gets reset on the unit, then maybe it's like running the daytime temperature and it's night, stuff like that. So obviously you have to keep an eye, but it has temperature alarms. I've never had my heater overheat or anything while using that machine. So
Cool. So it's reliable thermostat that I
yeah.
mean you've had it over 3-4 years now, so pretty
Yeah.
good.
I
Um,
think I got it. I think you can get it through different sources. I forget if Herpstat's the company or
mhm.
if it's like Spider or something. But I know I got it from Pangea at the time, those years ago. I don't know if they still sell it, but I know they've made upgraded versions. And there's
I
more
think I
complicated.
think that's where I've seen it too in Pangea, the Herbstat. Yeah.
It's really good. That's what Eslin told me to get, and I was like, okay. So
Yeah. Okay. And then incubation for the eggs. What's the setup look like and what temperature you're at?
yeah, so I actually used to use a wine cooler that I
Mhm.
found. It was like one of the few wine coolers I found that like went to the temperature that I wanted. So like 71, um 72, but like ideally like 68, 69 degrees. But then it failed. And I actually had it in the gecko room, and the gecko room was like 80 degrees, and so got pretty warm. After that, like I have a basement, so I just kept them in the basement. Obviously, incubation is a little more variable than in that case. I haven't really found a replacement for the incubator after that. Like, I don't know if I'm just not aware of good options, but I saw too many horror stories with other incubators and how like they overheated
Mhm.
and cooked the eggs. So I just keep mine at room temperature. During the summer, it's usually like 76, 77 in my house. I keep it warm for energy reasons, for money reasons. But so I would just like put them in the basement where it's like 72, 73, 74, and it's fine. And then like towards the fall and the winter, I actually have the eggs just behind me in the house because it's like 68, 69. And then usually based on the time of the year, I've always kept track of how many days it took for them to hatch. So based on the time of year, I kind of know how many days it should be. Like during the summer, it's usually like 80 days. And then like if it's towards the winter, it's usually like 100. So it's a little more variable than I would like, but I don't really want to take a risk and like trust a device that I'm not confident in and cook my eggs. So
Yeah. Yeah. And you haven't had even with the variable on temperatures, you haven't had any issues and stuff like that. They're just taking longer to. believe.
No, I've had a few weird things. You always have something weird when you've been breeding for a while. So this year I had a baby pip really early, and it wasn't viable. Like it pipped and it was alive, but it didn't survive.
Yeah.
I don't know why it pipped so early. Maybe there was a thud, like maybe there was like some disturbance or something and it hatched, or maybe it was temperature, but I don't know. All my other eggs were fine. So I had that this year that was kind of weird. Otherwise, it's just like, oh, I had eggs that failed, but it was because they were like conjoined twins and they died in the egg, or other like deformity or something weird that wasn't normal. But otherwise, I've never had an issue with just incubating at room temperature.
Okay. Yeah, and like you said, after so many years and the quantities that, once you start breeding, a good amount of quantities, you're gonna run into these issues, right? That
Hmm.
just through natural selection,
Yeah,
it's gonna happen, right? Just like in the wild, not every egg, hatches because the natural selection or just the environment is not perfect as well, especially in the wild. Um,
yeah,
and I think with us, I think we might be able to even see some of these imperfections a little more because we do try to give the perfect environment for them to hatch as much as we can.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, and it's part of it. I always say it when I'm doing my YouTube videos or I'm doing interviews. It's part of it. It's part of the natural selection of things, the world, how it works.
It
Um,
is like some weird
but,
stuff just comes out sometimes.
mhm,
Yeah, I've only had one twin, and yeah, they were conjoined at the head. So they actually, the egg failed. So, I didn't have to deal with them being alive, but I actually kept them, like in a wet specimen because it was
mhm.
pretty crazy. But other
That
than
is pretty
that,
crazy.
I've just had some that, they had, I don't really know why, but I've seen it, other breeders post it, but like the gecko just like kind of has a short like head and it has like a lump, like kind of
Mhm.
coming out of the head. I've had a few that were kind of like that. They just like stopped developing, or like their heart was outside of their body, it didn't close, the chest didn't close. So there's just been like a few that were like that. I'm trying to think. Otherwise, it's just kind of like some geckos that like maybe the eggshell was bad and they drowned in the egg, or um, that random one that pipped and it shouldn't have, and then it wasn't viable, like because it was too young. But I haven't had anything that was like, oh no, like maybe that's the pairing. It's kind of just like one and
Okay.
a lot.
Or nothing that to do with the fluctuation of temperature and that
Yeah.
stuff. I'm very surprised because I really haven't like done the deep dive on the crested geckos yet, like on the low temperatures for the
Hmm.
incubation. Pretty cool how 70 something degrees, or even the high 60s. It's pretty wild.
Yeah.
Their natural habitat. Do you know their temperature ranges in that area?
I don't know the temperature range, but I do know. I think it's nothing extreme, but it is fairly
Mm.
like warm there most of the time. It does drop a bit down, I think, at night. I knew the temperature range at one point because I looked it up. But if you just imagine these eggs are like buried in the ground, it's going to be cooler in there anyway. Um, so
Yeah,
yeah, I mean,
that's
68 degrees. Everybody always said try that for like better structure, because the longer they incubate, the bigger they could be.
mm,
So, but then again, I've had some that were just coming out at the higher temperatures and come out in 80 days and they still have really great structure. So sometimes I think it's just genetics and not necessarily
yeah.
incubation. But there definitely are those cases where like if you incubate too hot, they come out with underdeveloped crests. So it doesn't
Okay.
really affect the genetics or the capability of what the animal could produce, but you'll be like, yeah, that one probably should have cooked a little longer.
Interesting. That's a good tip there. Especially like you said, you want to have the best looking animal, especially something like a visual Xanthic or your super stripes, whatever's going to look be able to produce the best looking animal and the healthiest.
Yeah.
Um, gonna ask you. I lost my train of thought there. And we're talking about with sizes. Is it just genetics, like the size that you had with the animal, like the Xanthic male that you brought down?
I'm not 100% sure, but I think so. I know the father was huge and he produced a lot of large babies. And yeah, like not all of them were that big, but like the dad, like I'm not exaggerating when I say he's almost 12 inches long from like tail to nose, and he's like 70 grams and he's not fat. Like he's over 70 grams and he's just like well proportioned. Like he's a huge gecko in my opinion. He's the biggest crested gecko I have actually. And so his son, Erebus, the one I showed you, is pretty near the same size. Like he's pretty big too. Um, I don't see that with all my pairs. Some of my pairs, like the mom's really small and a lot of the babies are small too. So it's just like, it's kind of like a mix from the parents, like what their sizes are, I think.
Mhm.
I don't know. I think maybe, incubation, maybe it could play a role, but I would think that it's more like based on genetics.
Yeah. Could when Arevis is his name,
Hmm.
when he hatched, were you able to tell like he was a bigger gecko from the beginning,
Um,
or was it as they developed?
I would say that, there is variation in the size of your geckos when they're born, as in like,
Mhm.
okay, this one is over 2 grams. This one, like there's that variation. I would say all the babies were like pretty chunky, like they're big, big out of the egg, but not to where you're like, okay, that's huge compared to that baby. It's like, okay, this is just the average like size baby. It's just like as they grow, that they really start to get bigger faster, at least in my opinion, um, and really got pretty huge. I would say not all of the siblings got to be his size, um, but some were, and then some were kind of smaller. So I think it's just like kind of variation.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, just like right, like you can have parents that are bigger, and then you might have that child that's smaller compared to its siblings and stuff like that. It's just the
Yeah, for
genetic
sure.
lottery, I guess, right? What I was gonna ask too, lifespan on geckos.
Mhm.
What have you seen that's
Well,
especially
they've
on
always
breeders?
they've always said, "Oh, it's like 20 years for crested geckos." My very first gecko I told you, she died right before her ninth birthday. So, I'm not sure if she could have lived longer if it was because I was gone. So, I'm not really sure if it was like something that could have been avoided. Um, when she died in shed. So, it's kind of the thing of I don't know if she wasn't getting everything she needed while she was in shed because maybe my sitter wasn't very experienced, like, because sometimes you have an animal and they have certain needs and, like, overall they're being met, but when they're in a specific scenario or case, they need extra attention, and you as the keeper, to notice, you're looking carefully, you find the animal when it needs help and you help it. But when you have someone who's inexperienced, they're being paid to take care of the animals and doing a pretty good job, but they're not gonna notice like something like that you would notice. So um I don't know if it was a case like that where if I would have been there and I would have seen like, oh, she's a little dehydrated, she's shedding, let me fix this, and then she'd still be here. Or it could have been a case of she was already gonna go, and usually when they're shedding is when if there's something else wrong, it comes out at that time because that's a very stressful time for the animal. So I'll never have that answer. I'll never know. It's kind of hard for me. It was kind of sad because she was like my pet. So but she lived to about 9, like literally a few days shy of her ninth birthday. Um, my other geckos going strong. I purchased some that I just didn't breed. I purchased them. I think they've gotta at least be 10 or older now, still going. So I don't know, and I've seen people say they have geckos that are like 19, 14, 15. A lot of people say maybe theirs passed around like 12, 13, 14. So I think it's just a range and maybe just like, if a keeper has kept geckos long enough to find out. Because sometimes, people get a gecko, they don't keep them, they sell them or whatever. They don't really know how long they last. I know one of the geckos I bred from that female that died, because actually I did end up pairing her. She had amazing structure and her red was awesome. Um, some of her, I think one of her babies I gave as a pet to a friend. It died pretty young. It died like maybe 6 years old. But again, I don't know how well that person cared for it. And then my aunt has one and the gecko's still going strong. So I think it's just like it's a mix of like the keeper, how well are they caring for the animal, and then just like you don't know what's wrong inside these animals sometimes. Like it's kind of like, medicine hasn't really like reached the point where we really help like some of these smaller reptiles as well as we could maybe, or know as much about them as we could. So sometimes I think there's like things that go unseen, go unnoticed, and then the animal just stops. Like, there's no real sign. They can't tell you what's wrong. You find the animal passed away and there's like no sign of any problem and you never know why. So yeah.
Yeah. And that's interesting too. Like, you might take your animal, your reptile, to an exotic vet, and there's so many different species, and they probably don't see as often. Where it might just be a wild guess on the care or the what's it called, the treatment that the vet's gonna give them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you never know, it might help them or it might, not do anything or make it worse. Where
Yeah, and there's not a lot of exotic vets around, especially like, I hear there's more exotic vets in Florida because it's just like there's
Mhm.
more exotic species, but like out here in the Midwest, you pretty much can't find them. Like I have to go to the school vet hospital because I at least know that like they have more they have more like equipment and are more versed with like new things coming out because they're a research facility and like training vet students. But still, like I don't really know if it's the best care I could be getting, but all the other vets around, they're not going to be able to help my animals. So I have had to take animals to the vet for various reasons. They've pretty much always been able to help, but I did have a case with one female. I can't remember the name of the condition, but it was really strange. And she basically had like this like fluid filling her calcium sacs. It wasn't calcium. It was like this green, like fatty, like liquid, and it was like pushing out her eyes. And it was like in the sinus cavity possibly. And I can't remember the specific name they told me. I could find it, but it's pretty rare, but there have been some cases, and I actually found a scientific paper on it, from quite a while ago, some wild specimens that they found this in crested geckos, and actually it was mainly females that had it, which she was a female, and they always died, so, she didn't make it, but basically they were just like, we can experiment and see what we can do. They tried draining it, but it just like filled back up. So she ended up having to be put down. But basically, it was just like one of those cases where nobody really knows anything about this and they don't really know how to help. Maybe she could have been treated if there's more research, but it's just kind of one of those things that
It's
there's
just
not
not
a lot
enough
of help.
experience. Yeah. There's just not enough experience and research to be able to help all these animals. I think you know, keeping good records on, especially once you start doing this for 10 plus years, that you're right there, right?
Mhm.
Um, like keeping good record is important because you never know when that might happen again, or
Yeah.
you can help somebody through your records, or even
Yeah,
be.
like, crazy story is, like, shortly after that happened, I saw someone post on one of the crested gecko groups that looked like the same issue, and I was like, "Oh my god," like, "Check the calcium sacs, what are the odds?" Because like, that was the thing is, like, I noticed it when I checked her calcium sacs, and I saw that they were dark colored, like, it was not calcium that I was seeing, it was, like, some other
Mm.
fluid. Um, so, I mean, the cases are out there, but if nobody shares it, nobody does anything about it, it's never gonna be known. I kinda wish that was something that, like, maybe the vets, like, wrote up a special report on or,
Mhm.
like, something to share with other people what was happening, but
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's like you said, like somebody writing a report on it or documenting it in some kind of um record keeper or book about maybe crested geckos. Maybe Miss PhD Hannah needs to start a book on crested geckos.
that would be cool.
Uh,
I mean, I don't really feel qualified, but if someone wants to write it with me.
I mean, you never know, right? It just takes one person to throw the idea and start it off, and it could become something one day.
For
But
sure.
I think there's a couple books out there about reptiles in general, but very rare on species specific
Mhm.
documentations or anything to do with actual scientific facts.
It's true.
It's a lot of it's hearsay and experience of one keeper, right?
Mhm.
Where it's a lot more than there's no control groups or real scientific methods used to be able to write all this information down. Um, I think that's one of the things that I think I've seen recently. A lot of people going to trying to, survey like the natural habitats of a lot of reptiles we keep,
Mhm.
but it's such a micro like a micro time frame that they're doing this at. It's probably like a day or two, and we're basing off all the information off of 1 or 2 days where they've taken records of temperatures, humidity,
Yeah.
all that stuff where we forget we have the whole rest of the year being able to this animal lives and survives in these areas. um, I don't think there has been any real major studies like that being done yet.
That's a good point, yeah. I
So
always try to, like I see if there's, like, a you can get the temperature and, like, the conditions for almost anywhere. But sometimes
Mhm.
I, like, try to check those records, just to see because 'cause I'm curious.
Yeah, yeah. Have you ever thought about like maybe doing a trip to like New Caledonia, right? To be able to like maybe see some of these crested geckos in the wild and stuff.
Yeah, I think it would be really cool. I can't remember who I followed that I saw recently, they went on a trip to New Caledonia. I wanna say maybe it was some Korean reptile breeders, but I'm not sure, but I saw somebody recently, they went out there and they actually did see some crested geckos, which is pretty cool. I think that
That's
would be
pretty
neat.
yeah. You see, and it's crazy because like I keep a Western hognose and like I don't have to go that far to be able to go to find one. Um, we were actually at the Aquashella show. There's this one of the neighbors next to us, the nephew, he's a college kid too. He keeps reptiles, and he was showing me. He goes, "Oh, I actually saw a couple Western hognose when we're out on vacation in Texas."
Yeah.
And there's people that have been keeping hognose for 10 plus years that have never seen one in the wild. And
Yeah, I mean, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm out here in Kansas, I there might be some out here, actually.
yeah, there probably is, yeah. Probably like close to any like small body of water or something like that. Um,
We
you know,
have, like here where I am, it's like the Rock Hills, and
Mhm.
we have a we have the National Prairie Preserve here, and if you go hiking in the prairie, you can see, like, some really cool, like, those spiny, like, lizards that
Mhm.
almost remind you of bearded dragons, but they're not. They're like really small, and you just like you see snakes on the path and all sorts of stuff. So I wouldn't be surprised if one day I was hiking and I saw like a hog nose out there. But
That would be cool. That would definitely be cool to see. Um, I've been meaning to ask you, Greeks geckos. Where did that name come from?
yeah, so I'm part Greek. My mom is Greek, and it was just really big, like, cultural identity for me, and for whatever reason at the time, like, all my usernames were just, like, Greek this, Greek that, so I was just like, "You know what? I'm just gonna make it Greeks Geckos," and just, like, if you can kinda see my logo, I hired someone to make, like, what I wanted as a mosaic, so it's
Mhm.
like if you look really closely, it's like actual little like stones making a super striped gecko there. And I just kind of went with the theme of everything Greek. So
Yeah. Have you ever thought about like changing it or updating it and stuff like that, or you're pretty happy with what? I mean, I like
the
it.
name,
I think it's a cool.
yeah, like the name I'll probably never change. I would consider updating the logo. The artist who made it doesn't make them anymore, and I actually finally got, I think, the original file, so I could like edit it or update it. I'd be interested in like seeing like different styles, but I really love the mosaic idea, so I think it would be cool, like maybe if I made a new mosaic or something. So that is a good idea if I ever get around to it.
Yeah. No, and it's good because like you can tell it's a Greek design with the geckos. It's a memorable logo, something that you want to have
Yeah.
somebody easy to identify and be like, okay, there's no other person in the gecko community that has probably a similar logo to yours.
No, I don't think so. The only thing, like, because it is a mosaic and there's so much detail in it, it is kind of like it seems small. Like, like it's harder to see like that gecko from a distance,
Hmm.
like unless it's like a bigger image. So I think like if I made another mosaic, maybe I would like make it a little bigger or make it just like maybe I don't need the extra border or whatever, and
Hmm.
just like make some different geckos that are like mosaics. I know in some of the workup to this design, the artist like made the gecko just the head, and it was actually kind of like really cool. So I have it, but it's like an incomplete design. I think maybe making something like that would be really cool.
Cool. That's cool. So, we're getting close to the 2 hour mark. Any topics that maybe we didn't touch upon that you maybe wanted to bring up before we start closing out?
That's a good question. Um, Not really. I have two other geckos over here that I haven't shown yet, if
Okay,
you want to
cool.
see
Yeah.
those. One of these is like been gaining a lot of interest. It's really just kind of like an anomaly. Like maybe that's what I'm gonna name her. But it's a phantom lily white. She was born incredibly small. I actually wasn't sure if she was like dwarf or something, but she remained proportional. She took a really long time to grow, but she has just like this really unique like pattern that started to come out, and even now she's developing um more kind of interesting pattern. So she has like these really weird like splotches on her. She's kind of mad right now, but you can see she is a lily white, but she's like highlighter yellow just on the sides, and then she has this really interesting kind of like pattern. You can see it kind of on the the
Okay,
tip
on the
of her
crest.
breasts
Yeah.
and her back. And I don't know if I'd be able to show it, but she has like just recently she's getting like this charcoal black develop on her toes, in her armpits, like on the bottom of her. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to show it because she's mad. But you can check out some pictures on my page later. But she's just really weird looking. And I don't know if it's something that she can pass on or it was just kind of a fluke.
Mhm. And then, so what? She's on a higher red, like a red.
She Yeah, she's a red phantom lily white. But her white is like that highlighter, like yellow. You can see on her belly, which is something that kind of comes out sometimes with the lily whites. And then the other gecko is it's from a white wall super stripe project, kind of drippy project. She's a female super stripe, and she's really chill. So you can see that her stripe is kind of obscured from like how much pattern she has going
Mhm.
on. You can see her sides. Sorry, this camera is like kind of backward, the direction that you move.
Yeah, reversed. Yeah,
But she is
really cool.
one of my favorites. and her structure is pretty awesome. So,
Really pretty. You know, and one thing that you mentioned, and that I'm noticing in your geckos too is the how predominant some of the crowns are on them. Um, where I've never really paid attention to different geckos' crowns, you know, the crest size and stuff like that. So I think that was pretty cool that you mentioned about, especially even some of the incubation time.
mhm.
The crest make it wider. Have you ever noticed that certain parents might produce better crests?
Yeah,
Stuff like that?
most definitely. Yeah, I would say like some of my really like famous super stripe pairings like made really great structured geckos. I think, it's the genetics. The parents had pretty good structure themselves. And I don't know, if the incubation kind of like throws a little bit in there. But there are definitely some other pairings that maybe don't have as good of crests. It's something you can work on. Like it's not something that has to stay that way. It also doesn't mean the animal's worthless, like it may have like, a smaller structure, but maybe it has a really great super stripe and you're just like, okay, or the color that you wanted. Well now you just need to like improve the structure in your next breeding. So I think people need to go back to that more because I think a lot of people were just like, oh, this trait, I want it, I need it quick, I want to sell it, like, with the prices. And I think just like maybe we forgot our roots a little bit of just kind of like, oh, I'm really interested in this. I want to select this specific pairing and take my time and refine the structure, do this, do that. Like, even I had to like kind of remind myself recently, like, just like slow down and like remember what you wanted out of this and just like focus on those details. Like, and so just, like, going back to that, just, like, kinda why I started is, like, I wanna create this really cool thing, and it's not really out there yet, and just, like, remembering that, like, the genetics and the quality are really important.
Yeah. How talking about genetics and the quality. Sometimes it's important to outcross and right keep the bloodline
Mhm.
mixed with different bloodlines. Um, how is there any new bloodlines coming into the crescent gecko world, or is it basically whatever's captive, bred and born now?
I would say it's pretty much what's captive. I know there are some people who said they had, like, F1 or they had, like, some fresh blood. I know they were selling those. But I think the market's really opened up a lot more, especially this year with, like, Korea's sending here now. We're sending more commonly back and forth from Canada. Um, Europe was already kind of a thing, but just, like, it's become a lot more global, and obviously, like, those different groups imported from us and other places, but, there's more than, like, a bigger pool that people are, like, breeding from. And so I think that maybe that is good, kinda helps things, um, a lot. But I think for the most part, I don't think I don't think they're allowed to take any more cap
Out
or
of the
wild
wild.
animals. I could be wrong about that, but I don't think there has been any more. Um, so I'm not
Yeah,
certain.
I think you might be right. If I think yeah, I have heard the same thing where they're closed off.
Yeah, but
Now.
even then, like, I mean, people still consider crested geckos to be pretty young in the pet trade because I think the year they threw out was, like, 1994, which was when these animals were brought,
Mhm,
back to the US. So if you really think about it, compared to a lot of other species maybe, that's pretty young, right? Like, now it's been, like, what is that, 30 years?
mhm.
About 30 years, but that's pretty young compared to a lot of other species. Because like, that's my age, so, it's not that old. Um,
Mhm.
there's been people doing this type of thing, for a really long time.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure in the first probably like the first 5, 6 years, there's probably a lot of wild caught stuff brought in and mixed into the existing bloodlines and stuff like that.
Mhm. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think as long as you're doing responsibly, like outcrossing, siblings and stuff like that, I don't think we need to worry too much. Um, let me ask you because like I know like in Western hognose, um, like the albinos stuff that was really inbred, will get like bug eyes, and
Mhm.
like the lavender gene. You know, people we don't breed visual to hets. I mean, visual to visual because a lot of deformities happen or neurological issues. Is there anything like that in the gecko world?
Not that I really know, and if there is, maybe people aren't sharing it or talking
Mhm.
about it. Um, I know there was something with Lily White, and people were saying, like, incubating hotter, and there was, like, maybe, like, a head wobble or something. Like, there might have been, like, some neurological stuff,
Okay.
with maybe that trait. I'm not sure. That's the one that has, like, the super form is lethal. So,
Mhm.
um, yeah, I'm not really sure I know of any, like, examples of that. Um, but yeah, that's a good point.
So, um, a super lily white, what would it look like?
Well, they usually always fail in the egg, but usually they're like
Mm.
that kinda, like, nude looking, like, naked mole rat, you know what I mean? Like, pink,
Mhm.
like, kinda leucistic looking white. It's almost actually kind of like, what is it? The super cappuccinos, if you've seen those?
Yeah.
They kinda look like that, but they're a little more like you see that there could maybe be some whiteness, but not really.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting because I was thinking about it, where if I thought that they maybe a lot sometimes it would hatch but wouldn't thrive, but they're not even making that out of the egg.
Like,
Okay.
so many people tried, and people were like, "Okay, this is unethical now," because people would just keep breeding them and trying to see if they could get one that would live, and they always died. Um, and then when the super caps came out, I know people are against those because, like, I guess there were some deformities coming out, and the nostrils were too small.
Mhm.
I don't really have an opinion either way, because to be perfectly honest, I haven't really researched it, and, I don't have any caps, so I don't know anything about that, so I'm not gonna really comment, but I'm just telling kind of summarizing what I've heard in the community. I think I recently saw a breeder stateside that, um, was actually trying to work with them and thought that they could improve it, and, then they had a gecko that, like, I guess it had, like, a twisted spine or something. It was just, like, kinda humpbacked,
Yeah.
and they were just like, "Okay, we're done. We don't believe in this one anymore, that it's
I think
ethical."
yeah, I was just looking one up on Morph Market, super cappuccino, and they almost look scaleless too.
Yeah, mhm. I haven't
Um,
seen one in person, so I actually don't know, but I've only
yeah.
seen the pictures and videos, but then recently I just saw someone claim there's something totally different that they found that looks similar. I don't know, it was also in Korea, so there's, like, a lot of, like, crazy stuff people are finding.
Talking about like the Asian market, it's pretty interesting on what they produce sometimes.
Mhm.
Um, I don't, and it'll be interesting if it's just like a lot of other different things with in the Asian market or the Eastern hemisphere of the world where there's less restrictions and certain things you do, that they're able to produce a lot more combos or world first things. But in the hognose world, in I think different reptiles world, there is a lot of things that are it's coming out of Asia that we aren't able to produce for some reason, right? So
Yeah.
that's
I don't
interesting too.
know. I don't know if I wanna get into it because, like, I don't know if I have some bias or something, like, just from some things that I've seen that
Mhm,
weren't so positive,
mhm.
with some of the breeding there, but, I don't really know the reason, like, I don't know where their stock came from, if, they imported from the US or if their origin is different than ours, because like, AC and, um Alan Rapace, like, all those guys, like, kind of, like, I think started a lot of things and, like, were selling a lot of the stock that was going out places, and I can't remember where RCK originally got his geckos, from in Korea, um, but, a lot of those bloodlines are global, so I don't
Yeah.
know if that's where they got their bloodlines or not, that's something that maybe your next guest could be a Korean breeder or somebody who can talk more about their side because
Yeah, yeah, I
I
might
honestly
have to
just
look
don't
those up.
know, like, I don't know enough about it, and, we only see a little part, like, on social media. I think the main thing that, like, a lot of people criticize what they see is, like, the small cages and things like that sometimes, but, you know, I don't know
Yeah.
enough about how they're keeping over there, so I don't
Yeah.
wanna, like, bash them or
Mhm.
criticize, but, sometimes it's easy to judge just based off of the few things that you see, and it's not what we do, so we tend to think, "Okay, this is not good," but
For sure. Yeah, yeah. When I had a breeder from Korea. Yeah, from Korea. And he's a Western hognose breeder, and I was very impressed on the way of keeping and his
yeah.
record keeping. So
I think they're very
there
like,
is.
from my perspective, very meticulous.
Mhm,
I think maybe just their culture with other things, like, perfect product for you know what I mean? It's hard for me to explain. It's like they have this perfect thing that they created for this part of keeping or this perfect, like, paper towel that specifically paper towel for, like, gecko tubs. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they have everything, like, to me, it just seems like just, like, really well organized and everything. I think it's the size that everyone criticizes, like, "Oh,
mhm,
they criticize the size of the cages." But, otherwise, from my perspective, I think, like, just really meticulous, really careful. They're doing something right because they're producing a lot of geckos, but
mhm. Yeah. I was watching something on social media. I was going through the social media, and I was seeing, and I think this was in Japan, and back to like how meticulous and how they do certain things. They were doing a reptile expo, and it was really cool because what really caught my eye on it was not the tables and stuff like that. They look pretty similar to what we do here, but I think was they had like best of show
yeah,
in
I
all
saw that.
different. And I think that was really cool because it seemed like it was unbiased. Best of show and best in this specific species and stuff like that. I was like, maybe we should do something like that. You mentioned Tiki, David earlier, and he's trying to work something out with like a gecko grading scale or something like that.
I think I follow the page if he's the one that created it. I saw they created, like, some gecko judging thing.
Yeah, yeah. I forget what it's called now. I forget what it was. I had him on the podcast like a few months or 2 months ago, something like that, and he talked about it. And it was just what you're saying, trying to get better structure, better color, and all that good stuff within the especially specifically the crested gecko world. I think that's going to be pretty. If he gets to develop and get people to actually participate, will be pretty cool to see it
Yeah.
develop
I'm
and
kinda
grow.
picturing, like, with the beta fish judging.
Mhm, mhm, yeah. Well, Hannah, we're at the 2 hour mark. I want to thank you for joining us and sharing all your experiences, your thoughts within the reptile and crested gecko world, and your entomology background and stuff like that. I close out all my podcasts with the same question to the guests, and it's if you had 5 minutes of the world's attention, what would you say to the world?
For me?
Yeah.
That's a difficult one. I would just say I think what we all need to hear right now is, in a world that so fast-paced, really divisive, as they always say, really divided, I would just say people, should focus more on, what's important, which is loving other people, being kind to other people, even if other people are, like, crazy and, unkind to you, I would just say just kinda that universal rule of think about caring about other people, even if it's just something small, care about somebody.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I like that. Sometimes like a simple smile, right, or simple good morning sometimes might change somebody's day and outcome.
Yeah.
for that.
Or if you
For the
see
message.
somebody and, like, you're like, "Oh, those are really awesome shoes," just, like seems kinda scary to talk to other people, especially now with everybody, like, so introverted, but it's just, like, telling some girl that she had really awesome shoes could, like, totally turn her day around. So, I just try to be that person that's like, "Okay, I noticed something that's really cool. I'll tell somebody." Like, don't keep it a secret. Maybe that is will make the difference in their life that you didn't realize because 'cause they're really struggling with something. So,
Cool. Yeah. Well, yeah, thanks for that message. Like I said, thank you again. Thank everybody that joined us and participated in tonight's podcast. I just want to remind everybody, join US Arc Florida, join US Arc National, support them because they support us, keeping our reptiles, and then, where can people find you, follow you on social media or if they want to buy one of your geckos?
yeah, so you can definitely find me at Greeks Geckos on all my platforms. So Instagram, Facebook. I'm not really active on Facebook actually. I find it's easier to interact with people actually on Instagram. I actually did finally make a website. I have a store there, but I've mainly been uploading on Morph Market. So you can find me at Greeks Geckos on Morph Market, Instagram. My website is just greeksgeckos.com. Um, yeah.
Cool. Yeah, so in the description, it's her website and her landing page. You can click right to all her social media, her morph market. So if you guys want to go get a super stripe, the person to go look, you know, Hannah has.
I'll give you a long payment plan, so
There
30
you go.
days.
Yeah, she said with 3 to 6 months. So if you guys are looking at, I saw she had some Xanthic stuff
I do.
available on her morph market. So if you guys are looking for that, she's offering payment plans. So go check it out. Also, too, you just did a giveaway on an
I did.
Xanthic, correct?
I just gave away a Xanthic actually
Yeah.
yesterday, so that was
Oh,
exciting.
yeah, congratulations to whoever got that. That it was pretty cool. I kept up with the giveaway, so that was really cool of you doing that. And again, thank you for taking your time out of your day and talking to us this evening. Stay back real quick while I say bye, everybody. Have a good night, and we'll see you guys in 2 weeks. And we have another Western Hognose breeder. So see you guys on the next one.